Hey guys, welcome back to the This Is All Skate Shop YouTube channel. I'm Ivo, and in this video we're gonna dive into the skate terminology. There's so many different words to describe our sport and our hardware and the people who do it. Of course, there's skater, there's inline skater, there's roller freestyle, there's blading, there's rollerblading, there's skeeler, there's Partines, there's urban skates, FSK skate, freeride skate, freestyle skates. In this video, I'm gonna try to clear up those terms, get down to what they really mean, what they originated from, and what terms to use for a long and prosperous inline skating future. Some of my opinions might be a little bit controversial because some people are really they identify with certain words. I see that. I mean, I cannot really prescribe how anybody uses their terminology. You have to name it the way you want, of course. I cannot dictate this for you. If you're in doubt and you're seeking guidance, I have some guidance in this video, so that's what it's for. And I try to keep in mind what is the best term for in the future. Because I see a lot of debates, and some of these debates, they just end up in a dead road because they will never happen. I'll dive into that more later in the video, of course. So if you want to know what the controversial topics are, you'll come across them eventually if you just keep on listening. Let's start with the beginning, and that's the word skating. Skating is, of course, what you make of it, because there's so many different groups of people skating. There's so many different subdivisions, and every one of those people doing those subcategories identifies themselves as a skater and thinks that they have skate on their feet. So that's great, and that's a great aspect, and that will never change as well. So there's ice skating, of course, there's inline skating, and there's quad skating or roller skating. So there's three different main categories, and there's, of course, skateboarding as well, which also adopted the term skating later. Within inline skating, quad skating, and ice skating, there's loads of different subcategories, like aggressive inline skating, but there's speed in all of them. There's hockey, there's slalom, there's downhill, there's cross skating, like ice skate cross or inline skate cross, and that means that you're doing like a track, like a cross bike. There's off-road skating, and there's park skating, of course. So there's so many different terminologies and subgroups. The cool thing is that each and every one of them identifies as a skater, and when they talk to their friends, they say like, "Hey, let's go skate." Just imagine figure ice skating, for example. Imagine maybe a couple of 12-year-old girls sitting in their locker room putting on their skates. They would say to each other like, "Hey, could you hand me over my skates?" or "Let's go skating." They would definitely use those terminology, but these girls couldn't be farther away within the skating spectrum from me, from what I'm doing on my skates, but they still use the term skating, and that's fine. That's great. That's how it is. That's kind of like how ball sports also have so many different subcategories of ball sports. There's hockey, there's football, there's American football, there's handball, there's cricket, but they all use a ball and they all refer to the ball as the ball, and that's also fine. Nobody's arguing no, but you're playing hockey, so that's not a ball because only footballers call it. But those silly arguments don't exist, and somehow with skating you hear those arguments, and that's really weird. So it's fine that everybody calls within their own niche. You call it the way you call it skating, or you call it a skate. And then everybody within their own niche refers to the others as others. So a figure ice skater would call a hockey skate, but they would call their own skate a normal skate. And I, as an inline skater or an aggressive inline skater, would call an aggressive inline skating a skate, and I would call a quad skate, right? Or a roller skate. But where did the word come from? Actually, the word skate originates in Old English already, and it means slippery, or really low friction something. And it's used in a couple of different ways. So there's actually a fish, and it's a really slippery fish, and it's called a skate. This fish is called a skate because it's so slippery. And of course, the first uses of a sport is with ice skating, but it's also used for describing people. If they're kind of a little bit dodgy, a little bit sketchy people, you would maybe call him or her a cheapskate if they're if they don't pay really well. So that's also somebody who's kind of slipping away of their financial responsibilities. But you can also say, like, as a descriptive term, like, he skated away from the conversation, as meaning you're like sliding away yourself from the conversation. You're sliding away like that. That's also a matter of speaking, referring to the word skate. So skating as a term doesn't mean in itself, doesn't mean the way we use it. It has deeper roots than that, of course. But the first uses of a sport is definitely within ice skating. That emerged already probably in the Scandinavian countries, the Netherlands, and also Scotland, everywhere where it's cold. Somewhere in the late Middle Ages, first on wooden skates, then on skates that used a bone from like a cow or something underneath, like a leather shoe or a leather strap. And later, around the 16th century, the first like metal ice skate blades were used. And of course, the ice skate developed further and further until what it is today. All right, then we go into the next term, which is roller skating. And that's where it all started, of course. That's why you're here, because we like roller skating. But roller skating as a term used to be used for both inline and quad skating. Today, most people who say roller skating refer to quad skating only. And that distinction happened around the 1960s. People have tried roller skating since metal was more like highly adopted, more like steel was really in development. So definitely like around the Industrial Revolution, like 17th, 18th century, the first like inline skates and quad skates got on the market. But it's so hard to make an inline skate because if you're standing on one line, you need a supportive boot. And to make a boot with that support is just really hard without plastic technology, or now of course carbon technology. So the first successful roller skates were almost only quad skates. There were a lot of inventions for inline skates, but they were never like mass adopted because it was so hard to make. There were like big roller skating hypes already in like the 1880s, the 1920s, the 1950s, and the 1970s. So this is going on like 150 years already with the kind of like up and down of waves of the sport. Also brings us to the next term that I want to discuss with you, and that is skateboarding. Skateboarding emerged out of one of those waves of roller skating, because in the 1920s there was a big roller skating wave. So in the 1930s and in the 1940s, there were a lot of old roller skates from the 20s in people's backyard. So if you were like a dad in the 40s in America, you maybe had a pair of roller skates that you used or your wife used in the 20s. You must have been rich, right, as well. And those roller skates back then had the trucks where if you move your foot to the left, the trucks steer because of the tilting of the boot. And if you move to the right, the trucks steer to the opposite side. And that's the same mechanism now used in skateboarding. So you would have those skates with those trucks underneath it. And if you then had a child, of course, and you wanted them to play with those roller skates, they couldn't because it wouldn't fit. So you could take off the shoe, then you're left with the plate and the trucks and the wheels, of course. If you saw down the plate in two, so then you have like the two separate trucks with the steering mechanism, and you put a board over it, then you have a skate board. So that's where the term comes from. It comes from a skate with a board attached. Skateboarders sometimes forget this. I think that not a lot of skateboarders actually know where their own terminology comes from. I think sometimes skateboarders are also a little bit thinking that they invented the word skating and that roller skaters and ice skaters somehow adopted it because of them. I don't know how they see it, but sometimes I get that feeling. But at least now everybody knows because I explain it here. This is also why there's a common history within like the bearings and the wheels. A roller skate obviously uses the same kind of like axle as a skateboard truck. So the wheels are exactly the same and the bearings are exactly the same. So skateboards, roller skates and inline skates all use 608 standard sizing for the bearings. And this just happened because one of the roller skate manufacturers was the Chicago Roller Skate Company. And in that factory, also the first skateboards were used from kind of like the same trucks as those same roller skates. So they just used the same product, made a board on it, and then bam, you get skateboarding. And later it got adopted by like the surfers. So a lot of skateboarders and people in general think that skateboarding emerged out of surfing in a way. But if you look at the movie Dogtown and Sea Boys, which is a great watch, I would advise it to anybody. It shows the history of skateboarding. And then you see those surfers in the 70s kind of taking over an existing skateboarding competition circuit, where like people were already doing like downhill skateboarding and slalom skateboarding and freestyle skateboarding. And these surfers, they only took it over. They didn't create it. So that's the kind of like the origin story of skateboarding and where the term skating comes from within that culture. Obviously, if you look at a mountain bike, that is a bike, and a mountain bike is not a mountain. And a race bike is a bike, and it's not a race. So if you look at a skateboard is obviously a board, and it's not a skate, because the last part of a word determines what the thing actually is that it is, and the first one is just a subcategory. So if I look at skateboarders, I mean, again, anybody can use their own terminology and do as you please, but the way I look at it is there's three types of skating. It's inline skating, ice skating, and quad skating. And I see skateboarding as more as boarding, just like a surfboard or a snowboard. They have way more in common with that. And it's just the type of board that uses a skate. But I don't see it as skating as such. For us as well, if we use this movement, it's called actually skating. So the movement of pushing forward is called skating for us. Same as if you skate on a ski, so if you're skiing and you're using like a skate movement, it's called skating within skiing as well. So if you just look at that movement as well, I wouldn't call skateboarders skaters because they're not skating. That's something totally different, probably very controversial, my opinions on this, because skateboarders definitely do self-identify as skaters. And I know I can never take that away from it. It's just my perception of what they're doing. Fun fact for all Dutch speakers looking at this video, the word skating literally translates to Dutch for the word schaats. And I saw a news article, it was an old article, like a screenshot of course, from the 1950s, where they announced like a new hype. So after the hula hoop, there was a new hype coming to the Netherlands in the 1950s, and it was the schaatsplank. So that's how the Dutch media announced skateboarding. It's funny that to really understand how much like skating means skating, schaatsen. Schaatsen means ice skating in Dutch. So that's where really the word skating comes from. Okay, so that's a little bit of the history of the word skate and all the other versions of skating. We touched on roller skating, ice skating, and skateboarding. And now we're gonna only talk about inline skating. I guess that's what you're here for. This is an inline skate channel. I'm an inline skater. This is all skate shop, of course. We're an inline skate shop, only one of the few skate shops in the world that only sells inline skates. Most other inline skate shops also sell roller skates or maybe some scooters or something. So we are really specialized, and this is what we love. So this is my favorite topic. Now it gets interesting. Well, we already discussed it. If the wheels are in a line, then it's called an inline skate. And you can have inline skates with 2 wheels, 3 wheels, 4 wheels, 5 wheels, or even 6 wheels. I've never seen a 7-wheel skate, but you could make it. It would still be called an inline skate. The term inline skating, I notice, is sometimes a little bit confusing because people sometimes even refer to the word inline skating as being a subcategory of inline skating. And it can be done in a lot of different ways. So sometimes the word inline skating is used as a subcategory of inline skating to refer to recreational inline skates and then not aggressive inline skates. I would say like, yeah, I do like grinds on tricks, and then the other person would say, no, but yeah, I only had inline skates. Like this conversation would go something like that. Totally weird, because if the wheels are in a line, it's an inline skate. And sometimes I even have the opposite one. So that's shows how much a conversation like this is necessary. Sometimes people say to me like, yeah, I used to skate as well. I had like those real inline skates, for on the ramps. They would say something like this, which is the total opposite definition usage of the word inline skating. And I tell you now, at least the way I would like to see it, inline skating is not a subcategory of inline skating. If the wheels are in a line, it's called inline skating. I already said that any of the subcategories of inline skating refers to themselves as as skaters or as like having a skate or as skating. The only group that I know that sometimes doesn't do this are aggressive inline skaters, and I think it's really particular because as soon as like the context of like a skate park comes up and you have to differentiate inline skaters from skateboarders, sometimes the term inliner or inlines is used, and that is totally something that skateboarders made up because skateboarders see themselves as being skaters, so they refer to us as having inlines or being inliners, and then it's inline skaters like adopting their terminology for themselves. But no other form of skaters are doing this. Like the 12-year-old girls doing figure ice skating, sitting in the locker room, talking about their own sport. They would never say like, "Hey, let's go figuring," or "We are figurers," or using the word ice like that. Let's go icing, or can you grab my ices? Or like same for quads, like some actually for quads it's referring to the skate. Sometimes it's used as like quads as being like the quad skate, but you would never call somebody a quadder. So it would be really weird as well if you're like a mountain biker and somebody would call you a mountaineer, but you're like of course a biker. And so yeah, that's I would discourage anybody to use the term inliner or inlines for their own equipment. Be proud of what you're doing, do what all the other skate subcategory groups are also doing, and call yourself a skater having skates. Some people, however, refer to themselves as rollerbladers, and that's the next word that I want to dive into. Rollerblade is, of course, a brand name, and a very successful brand name. It was one of the early adopters in, especially in America. Their distribution in Europe wasn't that good in the 80s and 90s, so back in the 90s, it was scarce to see rollerblade skates here in Western Europe, at least where I'm from. They were there sometimes, but not as widely spread as roaches. And roaches really marketed the sports category as inline skates. And K2 also was really popular, and they had also K2 inline skates. So the brands are really clear in their messaging of what it's called. And here in Europe, they were a little bit more successful, as in America. And also I noticed in the UK as well, people refer to it as rollerblades and rollerblading. I think with this term, it's kind of like a dead end. If you think that this is the way you want to call it, of course I cannot make you not call it like that. But if we're talking about what's best for in the future, if we're talking 50 years in the future, with the term rollerblade and rollerblading, we're still going to keep on having this discussion. It's going to be an eternal discussion because the brands are calling it inline skating. So in 50 years, the brands are still going to be calling it inline skating because it is FR inline skates, Powerslide inline skates, Roaches inline skates, Rollerblade inline skates. So this discussion will keep on clashing. That's why I'm really clear in rollerblade is a brand name, and the sport's called inline skating. Maybe that's not true for everybody, but at least that's the only truth that will have a future where we're sailing into the right direction, and it's possible that we hit land, and it's possible that we come to a place where there's a unified name. Then the next term that I want to discuss is blading or blades. This used to not be a thing at all in the 90s and in the zeros. Somewhere in the mid-10s, it became a thing. And it became a thing, I think, well, it was always, I think, like a shortened version of rollerblading. So people have always used it in a way, but it became really a thing in the 10s because aggressive skaters were searching for their own identity, and they didn't like the word aggressive skating. So they didn't own it, and they were like still searching for it. There were a lot of terms tried, also like freestyle rolling was tried for a while. There was kind of like a search because of the lack of acceptance of the word aggressive skating. The way I have witnessed this firsthand, but maybe there's other things that I don't know of this story, is that one of the people mainly responsible for this is Johannes Jacobi, a great guy. He's the initiator of Winter Clash. He's the organizer of Winter Clash, one of the biggest events that we have. But he's also very active within the B magazine, BMag. BMag is maybe not as big as a thing right now. You can still go there, b-mag.com. Follow the website if you want. But back in the 10s, BMag had like a cultural impact, and he was, I think, the chief editor, or at least an important figurehead there. And so as a person doing a lot of media and like putting a lot of messages out there, you're like constantly thinking like, how do I write this? What do I say here? And then he decided that as a term, blading would be something that could be used by aggressive skaters for their sport. So you would be a blader, you'd be blading, and it would be blades. He even convinced me for a while to go with that. So if people are thinking I'm stubborn and set in my ways, I'm actually really open. So if you have good arguments why this is totally wrong, everything I'm saying here is wrong, please drop it in the comments. Because if you really have a good argument, I'm willing to sway. But like I did with when I talked to Yo-Yo back then, we changed everything for the whole company to blading, but it just ended up not working. And let me tell you why. If we call ourselves bladers and blading, we would take away the word skating. So what I actually did was like replace all the words on our website where it said skate or skating, and I would retype it as blade or blading. So if you would have a list of subcategories of inline skating, you would have inline skating, and you would have downhill inline skating, slalom inline skating, figure inline skating, cross inline skating, recreational inline skating, of course, urban inline skating, and then blading. That would be really weird as like a divider. So that's one really weird issue that comes up. Or you would have to call it blade inline skating. But somehow, whenever I coined that term to other industry leaders, like they really didn't like it. So every time I said like, hey, shouldn't we then be called blade inline skating? They would be like, what are you talking about? No, it's just blading. So if it's not blade inline skating, then it doesn't work. Then another reason that I realized is that we can try to push the word blading as much as we can, but the word inline skating will always be with us. It will always be skating. We cannot erase our history because it's always been skating. And also we cannot erase our future because it will always be skating. So we'll always have this trouble. If we pick the word blading, we'll always keep on fighting it. We'll never reach that land if we sail in that direction. We'll never reach it. We still haven't, and we will never. That's why I would highly discourage the word blading, because it's a dead end. Some people, if you look at other shops, they have on their website, they have like rollerblades or blades, and then inline skates, meaning that like the blades are like the aggressive skates for doing grinding, and then inline skates are for recreational skates. But then other shops actually have it the other way around. You have rollerblades as a category for recreational skating, and then aggressive skates as a category for aggressive skates. So even like internationally around the world, and if you look at all the media and what people are saying, there's just no consensus at all for like this word blading. Does it mean the whole of inline skating? Does it mean just recreational skater? Because that's what it's used for in sometimes, or does it just use aggressive skating? It's just one big mess. There's nobody like setting the tone. There's nobody following that. There's no clear anything. It will always be a big mess. The only way forward, if we want to solve this debate, if we want that this video is not necessary, if we want that this is clear, the only way forward is that if the whole sport is called inline skating, and if the doing grinds on your skates is called aggressive skating. All right, the next word is skeeler. This is maybe a little bit more for Dutch people watching this. If you are Dutch, hello. But maybe it's fun for foreigners as well, because in the Netherlands, people call the sport skeeleren. To my big annoyance, of course. So we have a big website, Marktplaats, and then if you want to sell your second skates on Marktplaats, it's kind of like our eBay. The subcategory is called skeelers. And one of the biggest websites, like a Decathlon or Bol.com, they have inline skates as well, and then they call it skeelers as well. The term skeelers really lives in like the mainstream Dutch people. Like everybody has heard that term. Everybody knows that it implies inline skating. That's why it's a really powerful and useful term, but it's just not the name of the sport. So every time it's used, especially if it's used in like official broadcasting or if like any big shop has a subcategory and calls it like that, it's detrimental and it's setting us back every time it's used. Let me tell you a little bit of the origin of that word, because it's actually a trademark. It's a trademark from the Dutch company Zandstra. Zandstra is one of the biggest ice skating manufacturers. We have a couple, but Zandstra is definitely one of the oldest. They're in Friesland. It's a family company. They've been around for, I don't know, 100 years. I don't know, really long time. Everybody knows Zandstra as well. And just like Rollerblade introduced the inline skate in the Americas, Zandstra introduced the inline skate in the Netherlands. That was already quite early, in like the 70s or something. I actually have one of the original Zandstra skeeler skates. They're a tri-skate actually. They have 3 wheels. Right now, all of the Zandstra skeelers have 5 wheels. They're still around. You can still buy Zandstra skeelers. They have their own logo. It has the trademark R, like don't copy our name. So it's actually just like the word rollerblade. It's a brand name and it's trademarked. So that's also a dead end actually in, I wish these companies would just like fight some legal battles over these names, because if they would just like be a little bit more clear of what the name of the sport actually is, we could all get our heads together and move forward. So Zandstra had a big impact in the 70s, in the 80s. They, like if you wanted an inline skate in the Netherlands, it would be a Zandstra skeeler. So that's how people started calling their skates, but also their sport. And that sport would then be like speed inline skating more than recreational inline skating. And it was so much so speed inline skating, or synonymous with speed inline skating, that in the 90s, when inline skating really boomed, that we had like the SBN, the Skatebond Nederland, or like the Skate Federation of the Netherlands. And the SBN, they had like definition of what the differences of the sports were. And their definition was a skeeler is a skate. So it is a skate. So it's within the subcategory of skating with 5 wheels. Now, of course, 2 things don't exist anymore. First, the SBN doesn't exist anymore. And second, skates with 5 wheels don't exist anymore in that way that they mean it. Because back then, skates with 5 wheels were speed skates. And we don't use skates with 5 wheels for speed skating anymore. The SBN merged with the KNSB, the Royal Dutch Ice Skating Federation. And now the official terminology of the KNSB is that skeeler is actually not the proper word for our sport, and it should be called inline skating. But still, there's a lot of like stubborn speed skaters, which are around like 50 or 60 years old. Maybe they did like the Elfstedentocht when they were young, and they're really set on this idea that a skeeler is a speed skate, and that an inline skate is like the general recreational skate, but what they are doing is called skeeleren. So this terminology is really cemented in our culture. Ironically, just like I said before with the word inline skating, that is also used in different ways, and the word rollerblading as well, and the word blading as well, that's used by different people, really think that it means a specific subcategory of the sport. So with the name skeeler as well, what I already said is that the speed skaters really think that it's their word, but then you talk to like, I don't know, like a random mom and their 12-year-old child, and they think that like they would say like, I don't really have a fancy skate, I just have skeelers. So they would say it in a way that I have these cheap, like from the Intertoys or like toy store kind of recreational skates, and they would think that that is called skeelers. So you see the same mismatch in what is inline skating and what are these terms used as, and like what are the subcategories and how is every subcategory used and what term is it? It's so confusing. I hope this video helps something. So then we have the next term, that's Partines. Well, Partines is not a problem in my life. I never hear it. It's a Spanish term, or in Portugal probably the same. I don't know, Italy maybe. But that's of course like then you have Brazil and Argentina and like a whole Southern America and maybe Mexico. I don't know. Like probably all those kind of like Latin type of countries call it patina or patins. And then you have for inline skates, they call it patina en linea. There's an argument here because most people in the world probably call skates patina or patins, because there's so many people there living there and calling it like that. So if you want to like name the sport and just see how like most of the people call it, then maybe that would be a good way. But I really don't think that this is a strong argument, but because when it comes down to it, I think that the most influential brands are the brands that we have here in Western Europe, like FR and Powerslide and Roaches, and they all call it inline skating. All right, so there's just no way around that. Kind of like it will never be like Roaches Partines or something. You know what I mean? That it's just the term inline skating is cemented within these brands so well, and I'm never gonna call it Partines as well. Then we arrive at the next term, and that's roller freestyle. This actually is a big problem in my life because we have the Federation International Roller Sports, the FIRS. And 10 years ago, I didn't even know the FIRS existed. They never did anything for our sport that I know of, at least. But now they have become quite dominant. There are like world championships suddenly, and like titles throwing around, like European Championship, and they're organizing all that. So all these federations, all these sport leagues, they're all like linked. So we have, like I said, we used to have the SBN. Now we have the KNSB. That's in the Netherlands, and the KNSB is officially like accredited by the Dutch government as being our federation. And the KNSB has a direct link to the FIRS. So anything happening actually in the Netherlands, if it would be a top-down decision, would come from the FIRS to the KNSB. And then if there would be an event in Amsterdam, like a World Championship, the FIRS would decide actually quite a lot on how it would happen here. So what they think matters, okay? And I hope that they all watch this video and change their mind, because they're going on a path which is, in my opinion, not in the right direction. They are calling the sport roller freestyle. And if you listen to the entire speech until now, you've heard the word roller already. And I described exactly how the word roller emerged as a term and kind of like means quad skating now. So when we talk about roller skates, we're not talking about inline skates. Maybe 100 years ago, 200 years ago, yes, it would be called inline roller skates, and you would have quad roller skates. But now in the last couple of decades, roller skates are quad skates, and you cannot call anything that's inline skating roller anymore. That would be really weird, except for if you're French, because in French they still refer to inline skates as roller. That's how they say it. So that's how also this emerged, because when the FIRS first kind of like was looking at inline skating, at least that's how I imagine it going. That was kind of like 10 years ago. And then you had the FIS, so not FIRS, but FIS. And FIS is a big competition in French. And big ramps, if you don't know it, Google it, because it's really impressive. FYSE, that's how you spell it. And the FIS is a French competition. And so that's why they call it roller, because they are stuck in their, I'm French and I don't care what the rest of the world says or think. So they just call it that without having like any international nuance on what the sport is called anywhere. And then FIS kind of like emerged out of BMX. BMX and also skiing. Within those sports, if you're talking about freestyle, that means kind of like the edgy, I'm gonna do jumps and flips category of the sport. So if you're a BMX rider, then the normal BMX, like the X stands for cross, right? So, and a cross competition, I explained earlier as well, is when you do like, you have a start and you do like a race over some hills and then you have a finish. So that's the cross competition, BMX. So that's kind of like the set rules division of BMX. Then you have the freestyle division. That's where you can do anything. That's where you can take those same hills that the motocross or like the bicycle motocross BMX people use for a cross competition. They use the same hills to do like a 360 or a backflip. So that's where BMX freestyle comes from. And that kind of like evolved to doing that in a skate park during a FIS competition. So they would have like big competition, BMX freestyle. Okay, so then you have scooters. Scooters just kind of like it's just like a copy of BMX. So it would be BMX freestyle. Trottinette, which is the French word for scooter riders. Trottinette freestyle. And then there would be like, oh yeah, inline skaters, you can also be part of the competition. But we're going to call it roller. So it's roller. And in the same line, they would call our sport roller freestyle. So that's where it comes from. But of course, if you look at it like that, it kind of like makes sense from like BMX perspective. But if you look at within our sport, freestyle means something totally different, because for us freestyle means free from the obstacles, meaning flat land. And that terminology actually comes from skateboarding. Skateboarding has that same distinction. If you look at Dogtown and Seaboys, which I referred to earlier as well, you see those freestyle competitions in the 1960s and 70s already. So it's really interesting. That's freestyle. It's just a piece of flat land, like a skating rink. That would be a freestyle competition. If you look at it within inline skating, first you take the word roller, which doesn't mean inline skating, and then you take the word freestyle, which means something really specific within inline skating, and you use that for aggressive inline skating. And that can never happen. This can never be adopted within inline skating, because it will never, like, inline skating can never be roller skating anymore, because that term is already gone. And aggressive inline skating can never be freestyle skating, because freestyle skating is already another category. Everybody at Fierce watches this video and realizes this really problem with their own terminology, realizes where it comes from, and realizes that it came from the wrong starting point. And you have to look first within our sport and what terms are used there. So these are kind of like the terms used for inline skating as a whole. That's what we just covered. Now we're gonna dive a little bit deeper into the subcategories. And the first subcategory is not a subcategory. I look at inline skating as a hand, where you have like the subcategories. So you have aggressive, slalom, downhill, skate cross, figure, and probably forgetting a few, because there's a lot. And then you have the hand, and that's kind of like the biggest part, and that's recreational skating, right? And then these are like gateways as well. So you can start with recreational skating and then go to speed. I didn't say speed. And then you can go to speed skating, okay? Or you can start with recreational skating and then go to urban skating and aggressive skating, right? So these are different routes that you can take, but you're gonna start at the beginning before you like divide yourself. So we're gonna start at the beginning, and that's called recreational inline skating. Recreational skaters are probably 90% of the sales. I don't know, that's a broad sweep. Most people buying skates just want to skate, right? They don't care about most things. They're probably not watching this video because they don't care enough. I wish they would care, because what we need to do, but that's also what we're doing here at This Is All Skate Shop, is trying to make people fall in love with the sport. So recreational skaters have a big problem, because if you think like, okay, I want to go skate, what types of skates are there? Recreational skates, that sounds like something that's for me. Then you're gonna search for that, and you're gonna find a lot of bad skates. Actually, the most skates that are advertised as recreational skates are really bad for recreational skating. So we're gonna go through all the different categories of inline skating, and later I'll tell you exactly what skates are best for recreational skaters, but it's not the skates advertised as recreational skates. Don't fall in this trap, because there are soft boots and hard boot on the market. So these are two extra terms that we're discussing. Back in the day, all skates were hard boots. Back in the 80s and 90s, all skates were hard boots. And late 90s, I don't know if it's 96 or 97, K2 came on the market, and K2 advertised as the soft boot. And of course, soft sounds really nice, because you want something soft on your feet, something comfortable, but it's a trap. With that softness, you also have low like sideways support. So I actually have, this is the first time I'm going to do anything with the table, what I have in front of me. So this is a typical soft boot, and what I mean with that it's weak is that if I hold it like this, I hold it still here, I can pull the top of the skate and I can move it like this. So that means two things. If you keep your foot still, the frame can move underneath your body without you wanting it, okay? You don't want that. This is not good. And on the other hand, if you do move your foot, your frame can be like, nah, I'm gonna stay here. And then eventually it will come, of course, but there will be a delay in your control. Okay, so you steer it, it doesn't respond. What you want is that if you do anything with your foot, that the connection between the boot, the mount, the frame, the bearings, and the wheel is so stiff that if you do anything, that it responds. Otherwise, you don't have control, and it feels like driving a car with a steering wheel that's loose. You can do this, but nothing happens, and that's not what you want for a recreational skater. So if you're like just beginning and you're like, yeah, but I'm not so good, so I don't need an expensive skate. Yes, but put somebody who cannot really drive in a car with the steering wheel that's loose, it will be a disaster, okay? So in general, a good skate is a good skate, whether you're good or you're not good. And skates are advertised as recreational skates are not good skates. So these are the softboot category, and it's a little bit of a, well, it's a good marketing term, but it's deceptive. What it actually means is that you cannot take out the liner. So this part, with this skate here, which is like a classical hardboot, you can just take out the liner and replace it, and with the softboot you cannot. Well, the cheap softboots are the worst skates on the market, but there's also expensive hardboots which are like 700 or 800 euros. And these are actually really good. So the term softboot doesn't really mean anything, so I try to avoid it anyway. I hardly ever use the term softboot because I think it's deceptive, because it doesn't mean anything, because it can be either really cheap or really expensive, and sometimes it doesn't even mean they're soft. They can still be really hard. The term hardboot is a reactionary term to the word softboot, because it was never used until we got the word softboot. And if you want to buy skates in general, I would say take any like hardboot of like 300 euros or something, 250, maybe 200 at the least, and then you'll be fine. That's kind of like the happy mid-range in inline skating. But also the term hardboot is deceptive, because hardboots don't have to feel hard. They can have like super soft and cushiony insides. It doesn't feel hard at all. And if something is hard but it's the right shape, it doesn't feel hard as well, then it's just comfortable. And the hardness also gives you control. So it's also good that it's hard. So don't see that like, I don't want anything hard on my foot. It's generally a positive thing if your skate is stiff. Skates should be much more like skis than they should be like ice skates. And unfortunately, inline skating emerged out of ice skating, but we would have been in a better technologically, like a hardware world if inline skating emerged out of skiing. And it would be super interesting train of thought on what type of inline skate would that look like a ski skate. That would be a fun project. Because that's what makes the better skate, is if it's like really stiff, just like a ski. The next term is slalom inline skates. Slalom inline skates and recreational inline skates have something of a shared history. Back in the 80s and 90s, all inline skates were hardboots. Then K2 came and all the brands saw K2 and they were like, damn, that's a really good marketing idea. We're gonna make that as well. And all the customers were like, they thought like, yeah, I want to have soft skates. They thought wrong, but they went and buy it because they're also super cheap to make. So all the brands started selling a lot of soft boots. Soft boots are kind of like running on slippers. Slippers are comfortable to walk like 20 meters in, but 1 kilometer walking is already too much, let alone running, right? So that's kind of like inline skating on a soft boot. It's a terrible idea. But people don't know that. The brands don't care, apparently. So like early zeros, all the recreational inline skates on the market became the soft boot type, which they were not in the 90s. So if you did know what you're talking about, if you did want to have a good regular inline skate to just cruise around the city with, do some distance and play around with, just normal skating, but with the good skate, the only good boots on the market which were like stiff enough to not have you lose that control were the slalom boots. Because the slalom skaters, at that moment, all the skate hardware diffused. So in the early 90s, hockey skaters, speed skating, slalom skating, and aggressive skating all used the same boots, okay? But in the early zeros, hockey skaters used hockey skates, aggressive skaters used aggressive skates, and speed skaters used speed skates, which by then were totally different from each other. You could not do each of the other sports on any of the other boots. Okay, you could only do those specific sports on those specific boots. 15 years before that, it was totally different. And of those, you could not recreational skate on a speed skate because they have a low boot. You would not have enough support. Hockey skates as well, they're like made to make turns with, they're not made to go on a straight line with. And aggressive skates, don't even talk about that because the wheels are too small. So the skate that comes closest for a recreational skater that kind of like wants to have a good boot is the slalom skate. So that's the next word that we're gonna dissect. Slalom skates are for slalom skating. And that is, what is slalom skating? Well, they use cones, and every time I go slalom skating myself, which is not a lot, I'm surprised in how short the distance is between the cones. They have 3 different distances, and like the shortest one is like really, really short. I'm not entirely sure what the measurements are, but it's like so short that you're like, wow. So it's like really, you need really low speed and really high maneuverability to weave through those cones. And you want to have a supportive boot. So the boots are good for recreational skating, but the frames are super short. And here you see this where like the toe is here and then the frame, the axle is right here. Having your axle to the back like this makes it so that you can do toe rolls really easy. And of course the axle that way in the heel makes it that you can do heel rolls really easy. Slalom skaters really like that. One other thing is that they really like, so is the short wheelbase is a rocker ring, where the outer wheels are sitting a little bit higher. So this skate, for example, has an axle that you can flip around to make the wheel higher, but you can also put in just smaller wheels. So, and we're still kind of like struggling with this stigma where like a general skate, which would be good for a beginning recreational skating, has like its roots within slalom skating. By now the frames are adopting a little bit, but we're now like 20 years later. So it's taking 20 years. This problem is like the softboot problem. It's taking 20 years to fix and we're still not there. Okay, if you want to go slalom skating, get a slalom skate. That's great. If you want to go low speed. If you want to go recreational skating, and that's kind of like just normal like 10 to 15, maybe 20 kilometers an hour skating, then the boot is good, the frame is too short. The next term is freestyle inline skating. I already dove into the term freestyle a little bit. Freestyle means free from obstacles, flat land skating. It's also a little bit similar to slalom because if you're going in a skate rink and you're just skating around, you don't want to have like too short a wheelbase. You don't want to have like this short rocker. But in general, like the boots, the skates are a little bit the same. So freestyle inline skating and slalom inline skating, in my opinion, like hardware-wise, are really close together. So freestyle inline skates are really great for just recreational skating. But the best skates for recreational skating, I'm gonna dive into later. Then we have a couple more terms. This is where it gets really confusing because we also have urban inline skates. And what is an urban inline skate? Well, it's basically a slalom boot with like a 4x80 frame, just like a freestyle skate and just like most slalom skates are. So these terms are really, they don't really mean hardware-wise, they don't really mean anything that much because they all use the same hardware. And then we have the term FSK, which is kind of like short for freestyle skating. It can be really confusing as well, but it just means urban skating or freestyle skating, which is kind of like all the same thing. Maybe in what you actually do with it is a little bit different. Maybe like a freestyle skater is maybe a little bit more dancey and like skating in one spot, and an urban skater is somebody who's like really skating through the city. And FSK is also, I think, just skating through the city. But you really need the same hardware and you're probably going to use your skates. I mean, if you're skating through the city, you're going to probably end up on a square and do some freestyle skating there. Or if you're going to like be a freestyle skater, you're going to like go through that spot. So like they're like totally mixed up. So don't get confused. They all mean the same thing. Then the next term is flow inline skates. This is a term that is also debatable. We use it here at This Is Soul. I don't think a lot of other shops or brands are using it. There still is kind of like a naming vacuum, in my opinion. Most people call this wizard skating, but Wizard is a brand, and I don't see that as like something that will work in the next couple of decades. I don't think it's smart to pick a brand name as a category name. And the way that they have been trying to sway around that a little bit is by saying that it's wizard style. So wizard frames are really long and they have a rocker. So that would be the wizard style. And any skate with that would be a wizard style skate. It just doesn't work. If you look at a list of categories, it would be aggressive inline skates, speed inline skates, figure inline skate, slalom inline skate, wizard style inline skate. It would all be weird, right? So then in that list, it would still be wizard inline skates, and that's just a brand name, right? So I don't see how that word style would mix up. If anybody has a better solution for this, please let me know. But because of this problem, we just coined the term flow skating. Flow skating is also something that's used by Sean Unwin, and Sean has a great channel. It's called Flow Skate. So I hope he likes me using that term as well. And you could say that flow skating is a little bit different than wizard skating, but I still see it as the same thing because they use the same hardware. So flow skating would be maybe a little bit like going from A to B on skates, just like Sean is doing in his channel. And wizard skating maybe would be a little bit more skating on the same spot, but that would be then just the same thing as like urban skating and freestyle skating, where I already also said that that's basically the same thing anyway, right? If you're gonna make that distinction within like flow skating or wizard skating, it just doesn't feel right if you're using exactly the same skates to call it something totally different and to really like, no, flow skating is this and wizard skating is that. So if you use the same skate, it's gonna be the same category, I think, right? So that it's a little bit controversial, but we have to think, like, just like I said before about yo-yo, like you're like editor-in-chief from BMAC and you're doing that competition, so you have to like constantly name things. That's how we are here at This Is All as well, right? We're constantly like making videos like this and making blog posts and like making social media posts, and you're constantly thinking like, how should I call this? So sometimes we just have to like say it like, okay, we're gonna call it like this, and then at least then we have a structure, and as long as we have a structure, then hopefully other people can click onto that. Okay, so that's a little bit of a history of the term flow skating. There's not much of a history except for what I just said. Category-wise though, it's the most interesting category because we talked a lot about recreational skating, urban skating, freestyle skating, and for all of these categories, except for slalom skating, because they really want to have that short wheelbase, especially if the cones are so short together. But for all the other categories, having a long wheelbase just makes that you are more stable, all right? The last thing people want when you go skating is to fall. Actually, I think the main reason why not like most people in my surrounding are actually skating all the time is because it's just a little bit sketchy and it's a little bit hard and you have to practice techniques and there's always the risk of falling. And anything we can do hardware-wise or culture-wise or technique-wise or anything that we can do to make that people fall less is something we should do as a sport, all right? Having long frames helps, all right? Having long frame helps for falling. Just like skiing. Like my mother is like 70-year-old, but she went skiing a couple of years ago, okay? Because the skis are super long, she cannot fall, okay? But she would never inline skate. Even ice skating, like her ice skates are a lot longer as well. I think she went ice skating a couple of years ago as well. That's why flow skating is so interesting, because the frames are so good for recreational skating. So if you're a recreational skater, the best skate is a flow skate, okay? If you are a flow skater, if you're an advanced skater, then you also want to have stability. Like I've been skating for a long time, but I also don't mind if I don't fall. That just broadens my my possibilities, and it broadens the range where I can experiment in because I'm more stable. And normally the length, if you add length to a frame, it becomes more rigid, like it becomes less maneuverable, all right? Because you have more length, it doesn't rotate as easy on the ground. So your strides don't come as easy anymore, turns don't come easy. But having a rocker, so having the outer wheels a little bit higher, makes that you are maneuverable. And that kind of like solves that problem. So long wheelbase with a rocker, that's flow skating. That's for me, that's the future of inline skating. That's where most recreational skaters are best to diving into. That's also where both the intermediate and advanced skaters are best to diving into because there's so much fun there. The opposite of flow skates are tri-skates. So that's the next term. I am really not a big fan of tri-skates. I try to discourage the usage. So if you think about getting a tri-skate, don't. We have a full video, of course, about the difference between 3 and 4 wheels. In short, the more wheels you have, the better the road is equalized. So the less bumpy of a ride you have. You don't want to have any vibrations. If you have less contact points, you'll have more vibrations in your skate. People think I'm going to have big wheels, so I'm going to ride over everything smooth. But then if you take out one wheel, it's not going to be a smooth ride anymore. Then because of the bigger wheels, you're also higher from the ground. You're taller. And also often the wheelbase is super short. It's kind of like walking on stilts, like those big like things that you put under your foot. This is not the solution to get more people into skating, because as I said before, I think most people don't skate because of how dangerous it is and the lack of control they have, and if they fall, what if? And making a skate that's taller from the ground, more likely to fall, because like there's like a tripping effect. If I have like a tri-skate here, because of the height, if there's something on the road, it's way easier to trip over it because the leverage is higher. And if you have like the opposite, this flow skate, the long wheelbase low to the ground, the same, if I push with the same force in the back, you're way more likely to just roll over it instead of doing this. So that's what people don't need, is the tri-skates. It's a name though, you can buy it and you can try it. So maybe that's a good summary for this category as well. Try it and then leave it again, because that's what most people do. You have to burn your own fingers on the stove. You cannot trust anybody on these things, because I can say those things, but eventually you have to kind of feel it yourself to really understand it. So maybe a friend of yours has a skate like that and you can try it from them, then you don't have to buy it. But if only people would take my advice, that would be so nice. All right, then the next category is aggressive inline skates. And this is, of course, really close to my heart, because for the longest time I've only been an aggressive skater, and only later I've started freestyle skating, urban skating, FSK skating, slalom skating, freestyle skating. What are all those terms? I've been starting doing the big wheels. I could just call this freestyle skating, by the way. I call big wheel skating, I call it freestyle skating. So if you're searching for a term, that's at least how I call it. But I think all of these terms are just, the end spot is the same. So aggressive skating, it's close to my heart. And also it hurts my heart as well to see all those like, kind of like the identity crisis within the sport. It hurts me that some people thought it was necessary to coin a term like blading and to make even more confusion than that was already there. What I wish for aggressive skating is that it would just own the name that has been given, the name that's been used the longest, and it's also the name that people maybe don't like to use. Yes, people don't like to use it maybe, but they end up using it anyway. So if you look at, like there's a lot of podcasts, and some of these podcasts they're mostly with English people, like, or Americans, like they speak English. And they kind of like, they dance around the term aggressive. So maybe they start off the podcast and if you look at the terminology, it's really a pattern within almost any of these conversations. So the podcast is usually a conversation with 2 or 3 people. And the conversation starts off with maybe they say the term blading, they say the term skating, but then when they dive deeper into the conversation and need to like differentiate different types of skating and want to differentiate the type of skating that they do for grinding, they always end up with the term aggressive skating. Okay, so that is just what it's called. Then if you look at other brands, all the brands call it aggressive inline skating or aggressive skating. So there's no way around that. The only brand sometimes that doesn't do it, I think, is Racers. They sometimes call it blading, but then Racers doesn't have like, they don't have to differentiate because they don't have a big wheel skate, right? So all the brands, if they want to differentiate their aggressive skates from recreational or freestyle skates, they use the term aggressive. The term aggressive will never disappear. It's just a matter of, will you own it or will you not own it? And I think that I'm proud to be an aggressive skater, and I think everybody should be proud to be so. That's just the term that we have, so own it. So this is, of course, an aggressive skate. This is the Levi van Rijn Pro Skate. Levi is one of our team riders. He works at the shop here as well. We are in the shop in Amsterdam, but we have a store in Berlin as well. And of course, this is sold.com online. So this is his Pro Skate. And an aggressive skate, of course, has a groove here in the middle. It has small wheels, about like 60 millimeters. And usually it has a sole plate as well. And the sole plate is so that you can stand on an edge like this and slide. So that's what grinding is. And that's why the wheels are so small. If you don't want to grind, then don't get an aggressive skate. So that's a common mistake that people do. They think like, yeah, I want to do tricks on skates, so I want to have an aggressive skate because it kind of like looks the coolest. I definitely agree with that, it looks the coolest. But the skating experience on these, just skating around, is just really bad. You're not going fast and the wheels are really small. If you just want to skate around, get a freestyle skate. So because of that kind of like thing within aggressive skating where the word aggressive, if it comes across so aggressive, right? And maybe I don't identify as an aggressive person. So also the brands maybe don't identify as aggressive brands. Some brands try to go around this and not use the term aggressive. And it's a really interesting dance to see how they do that. Because it's a dance, but it's not working. At least maybe like, I mean, they're doing it, but like it's super confusing. So for example, the Rollerblade brand, they call it like park or street skates. And if you look at aggressive skating, there are 3 subcategories of aggressive skating, like historically anyway, because probably you can maybe make some more. But the 3 subcategories are park skating, street skating, and vert skating. Well, vert skating as a subcategory was really big in the 90s, but now I know like 3 people in the Netherlands doing it, and that's about it. I mean, I like going in the vert from time to time. It's fun, so it will never like completely die. But saying that is like a big category of like a demographic where you can market to is that's definitely not a thing. Interesting fact about these 3 subcategories is that there's no hardware differentiation that much. Maybe vert skaters, for example, they care about like wheel quality and bearing quality a little bit more because they really like to go fast, but they're definitely using the same frames and the same boots. The hardware differences are at best negligible. So these 3 terms, hardware-wise, if you're a skate brand and you want to sell your skates, they are like, it doesn't make any sense to pick just like randomly one of these categories and then say like you're like making street skates and instead of making like vert skates or park skates, because it doesn't matter. But at least that's what some brands are doing. So some brands are saying we're making street skates. I'm sorry, some brands are saying we're making park skates. And the term park and street are really weird if you're taking them out of the context of aggressive skating. Because they mean something if you call it street aggressive inline skating or park aggressive inline skating. Because it's different if you go on the street or if you go on a skate park. There are also a little bit different type of people doing it. It's the same hardware. Sometimes it's different mentalities, like park skaters are maybe a little bit more clean. Street skaters are maybe a little bit more creative. You can say things like that. Like in general, it's not a big difference, but you could say things like that. But if you take it out of the context of aggressive, and you just say street skates, and like, for example, my mom would read like street skates, that's the street here, you see that? Like there's the bicycle path, there's the street. A street aggressive skate is not meant to go on the street. So as the term street skating without aggressive on it, weirdest way to describe an aggressive skate ever, okay? Because it's not meant for on the street, it's meant for street obstacles. Then park is the same thing. Like we're next to the Vondelpark, which is one of the biggest city parks here in Amsterdam. People skate there a lot. If you want to have a skate that's meant to go in the park with, the Vondelpark, then having an aggressive skate would be your worst pick. So calling an aggressive skate a park skate is also really weird. The only reason to do that is because you dislike the term aggressive skating so much that you're like doing like this weird dance around it to avoid using it. I think we just have to stop dancing around the word aggressive and own it. That's how I'm gonna wrap it up. There's this argument of people saying like, that's just how I call it, or that's just how it's called, or that's just how it's done. And I don't believe that. Because in my life, I have seen a BMX bike transform from a crossfiets. So maybe that's a Dutch term, I don't know. But at least where I grew up in the 90s, when I was young, people had a cross fiets. I had a cross fiets. I was proud of it. So you could call it a cross bike as well, probably in English, I'm not sure. And everybody in my neighborhood would call it a cross fiets or a cross bike. And now definitely those same people, like my mom again, my mom would call it a cross fiets, and now she would call it a BMX fiets, meaning a BMX bike. 100% of those people change their opinion of what they think that this thing, like a children bike with small wheels and a small saddle and a big steer, what that would be called. 100% of those people changed it. And I think if we just get all the heads in the same direction, naming-wise, we can also just set the culture for the next generations of inline skating, so that hopefully in 20 or 30 years, a video like this is not necessary. Thank you very much for watching, because this was a long one, I think. And if you managed to go to the end, that means a lot. It means that you care, just like I care. And if there's anything controversial in this video, and if you want to enlighten me on any of the topics, if you think I missed something, drop it in the comments, because I'm interested to see if I missed something. We make a new video, of course, every week. So if you like content like this, subscribe to the channel, and hopefully I'll see you here in the store one day. Bye bye.